All right, folks, welcome in. It is the latest edition of the Last Word on Sports Media podcast for June. We are in the month of June. I am merely the somewhat competent host, TJ Reeves. Hello to my co-host, Mike Gill, who hosts the Sports Bash, the weekday afternoon Atlantic City radio extravaganza on 97.3 ESPN in Atlantic City. I'm based here in West Central Florida. Speaking of Florida, who knew that Florida now rules the roost in the National Hockey League? 6 consecutive years with a Floridian team in the Stanley Cup Finals. More on that in a bit. Mike, how you feeling? The NBA Final set, the Stanley Cup Final set, how you feeling here as we get underway?
No basketball playoffs this year for the Philly sports teams. The Flyers haven't been in the playoffs in 5 years, so the winter sports have not treated us well here in the Northeast in the Philly region. But hey, Phillies have been pretty good. A lot of baseball in these parts, but OTAs. We got the Super Bowl champs up here, man.
Yeah, the Eagles are going through organized practices, as are a lot of the NFL teams. There really is no NFL offseason, as we keep talking about. But these are kind of the dog days here where we are at the end almost of the basketball and the hockey. Baseball will still be left. We've got college baseball that we'll talk a little bit about. Softball World Series is going on for the ladies on ESPN, but it kind of thins out this time of year. We'll still be creative here on the Last Word on Sports Media.
This is the event time of the year, TJ. We were talking about this the other day on my radio show.
I see my man Mike off the top rope with the elbow right away when no one feels bad for any Philly fans. Amen on that, because we own Philadelphia in this market in Tampa Bay. Good man, Mike.
And we'll be down there week 4 where it's been miserable for the Eagles. But that being said, this is the event time of the year where you get 2 to 3 weeks of College World Series, women's college softball, where it's on every TV and every bar you're just sitting there all day watching an hour and a half game after hour and a half game, which will then morph into Little League World Series.
True.
That's coming up here, I guess, at the end of July, early August. You'll start to get into the regionals. This is the time of the year for the 2-week event. French Open, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Kentucky Derby happens. The Indianapolis 500 happens. So it is
Belmont's coming up. U.S. Open golf's coming up.
That's correct. So thank you for finding us. However you've done so, we're doing this live on social media here this afternoon on a Tuesday. If you're watching us live through Mike Gill's YouTube page or through our social media, he's at Mike Gill Show. I'm at Bucks Sideline Guy, BUC for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Bucks Sideline Guy on social media. Podcast audience, Apple, Spreaker, Spotify. Find us on podcast. Take us in the AirPods, the earbuds, etc. Pod audience, come see what we look like, the male models that we are here on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast. And again, if you're seeing us on video, take us with you in the car, Bluetooth, etc. And we have guests. You recently talked with Larry Colmus, speaking of horse racing, the NBC Sports track announcer for the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness. You interviewed him one-on-one on the pod feed. Also on the pod feed, Sean Kelly, the voice of the Florida Gators on radio. Gators winning the National Basketball Championship in the Final Four in San Antonio in April. But Sean also doing ESPN radio coverage of the NBA playoffs. He worked the Pacers-Knicks series, won by Indiana. More on that in a moment. But here's Sean Kelly on the pod feed as well. Apple, Spreaker, Spotify. He was just on with me. Great conversation about making the adjustment from the college basketball to the NBA basketball and calling games, some of the cool venues that he's broadcasted from. And this is the first time in his career that he had ever been to the Final Four, and he calls a Florida men's national title win in the Final Four. So hear from Sean Kelly on the pod feed. As I mentioned, he worked the Pacers-Knicks, where Indiana eliminated New York, as we have talked about for a couple of weeks. What would happen here if we end up with smaller markets? We have it, Mike Gill, Oklahoma City and Indiana. What are your thoughts on, is America going to embrace this even a little? Is America even going to pay attention a little? Because it's not major market teams. It's not the Northeast teams, the traditional powerhouses. It's not the Warriors with Steph Curry, the Lakers with LeBron. There's no Kevin Durant. There's no Jason Tatum and the Celtics. What do you think about OKC, Indiana here as we get ready to have that series get underway?
Yeah, I think they're going to have growing pains, obviously, early in this series. I think it's going to get off to a slow start. It doesn't help that you have such a heavy favorite in this game. I mean, you've got Oklahoma City in this series, but in the game itself, I think Oklahoma City is almost a 10-point favorite in game number 1. They are prohibitive favorites to win not only the series, but you can get them in sweep odds that are pretty high. You can get them in 5 games. So most people think this is going to be a quick, dispatch of the Indiana Pacers.
I don't know that I agree with that. I think
I'm just saying, it's hard if you're a casual fan and you're seeing the betting odds suggesting this for you to jump in with 2 feet. Now, unless you're saying, man, how good is this Oklahoma City team? I haven't seen them all year. Why are they so good? Let me watch. Yeah, you might get a little bit of that. But, I think it's going to get – the only way this does, a decent number, does Indiana get a split early, then get it to a 6th or 7th game, you might get yourself up to the –
Well, they won both of the games in New York to start that series. And if I'm not mistaken, they won both of the games in the previous series as well on the road.
They did,
so
yes.
Maybe they will get the split right away. But does it resonate like you're in Philly? Does it resonate in New York? Does it resonate in L.A.?
Well, I'll tell you what.
I mean, does it resonate in Detroit?
It doesn't resonate in Philly. The whole basketball season hasn't resonated in Philly. But you lost Boston a couple weeks ago. They've been out of sight, out of mind, kind of detached from the basketball season. I don't know what they got. The baseball team stinks up there. So the Boston sports market has been kind of detached from basketball. Philly sports market detached from the NBA this year. Chicago has been detached from the NBA for years now.
Decades.
Right exactly. So you got some big markets that have detached themselves from there. And then Chicago, like you said, the Cubs are playing pretty well. The Phillies are playing pretty well. So now you're not grabbing those people to bring them here.
Right.
Oklahoma City is a very small market size. So how many people outside the Oklahoma City Big 12, the old Big 8 area are latching on to them? Now, I don't think the ratings for this series are going to be very good, but Oklahoma City's here to stay. That I think we're pretty sure of. Right. Is Indiana here to stay? And can these two teams start a new, which I think right now, TJ, is we are seeing the beginning of the next era of the NBA. The LeBron, Curry, Durant, Kawhi Leonard, they're all kind of getting old and getting knocked out in the first round now. Right. The new era of basketball, which Miles Turner talked about. Young, out and run, defend. That's the new era. These not super teams. So is the NBA fan ready to embrace that?
And you pointed that out, I believe, last week on the show, that now you've got Jalen Brunson, like we were talking about. Jason Tatum, though, has a serious injury that he's coming off of, but he led the Celtics to the championship a year ago. But with SGA and Chet Holmgren and Tyrese Halliburton, these are new names. If you're an NBA fan, you got to get used to them. But nationally, does it resonate the same way? Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland, Cade Cunningham in Detroit. I'm rattling off the names. How much does that resonate like Steph Curry, LeBron James?
Not yet. Not yet. And I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, if you asked the Philly fan, who would you rather have, Tyrese Halliburton or Tyrese Maxey? I don't think you get one Sixer fan to say, I would take Halliburton. Maxey is the most popular kid. They love him here. He's a very good player. But this Halliburton has gone to another level. Right. 2 years ago, nobody would have taken him over Maxey. Now you have almost everybody saying this guy Halliburton is the reason why this team's in the finals. They got Pascal Siakam, who won a title with Toronto, but hardly a household, superstar level name. So Indiana is going to be tough to resonate with right now. Oklahoma City has the MVP of the league. They're a very deep, unbelievable defensive team. But I don't think outside of the MVP, does anybody know who the second guy on that team is?
Stay tuned. Stay tuned on watching it. We do know this. The ratings are out for the Game 6, the clinching game on Saturday night. And it did okay, registering about 8 million people on cable. The final broadcast, Mike, as we've been talking about for Turner Sports after over 35 years of being associated on TNT with the NBA playoffs and the NBA regular season, that relationship is over. It's a 41-year run for Ted Turner's TBS and TNT, because the Atlanta Hawks used to be on TBS in the 80s, and they would show Hawks playoff games on TBS. So the rating is what, an 8.1 million audience.
For the
final Inside the NBA had over 3 million watching for the Swan Song, the sign-off. I know they did this back on Saturday and we're a little late to the party, but I thought it was a great send-off from Kevin Harlan. He did about 5 minutes of saying goodbye to all the great announcers, going all the way back to Bob Neal and Doug Collins and Craig Sager doing games in the 80s, and then moving forward to Marv Albert and Steve Kerr doing games in the 2000s for the tournament. And now Harlan and Reggie Miller had basically been doing games for over 20 years on Turner, with Stan Van Gundy added in. So he did a great send-off. They did the final Inside the NBA. What are your thoughts on all of that? We knew it was coming. It's now over for them for a while, because these new deals that NBC and Amazon have are decade-long deals. So what about the end for Turner and the NBA?
Well, I'll tell you what, this is a big number, 3.5 in my mind. Now, it says the most watched Inside the NBA in 2 years, which tells you how popular this show is, that the last one wasn't the most popular one. Now, we do know it will live on, and there's some reporting on what that show might look like over at Front Office Sports today. But I did watch as much as I could. It was late. It was after midnight in the East when they were doing the sign-off. I did see Harlan. That was awesome, with all the pictures taking you down memory lane. Hubie Brown in some of the shots there. You know, he mentioned, going all the way back to the beginning. Dick Stockton, back in the early days of TNT.
It's interesting that you point that out. When CBS lost the NBA to NBC in the early 90s, Dick Stockton and Hubie Brown left CBS and they came to Turner, and it was a big credibility thing to help Turner back in the 1990s that they got those two guys. That seems like it's on Pluto, Mike, in the present day, but that was a big deal. When they showed that photo of Stockton and Hubie Brown, that was a big deal that they got those guys back in the 90s to help their credibility.
Yeah, and so you mentioned Harlan, and I thought Ernie Johnson gave a great send-off, very heartfelt, and then he had Shaq and Kenny kind of throwing some F-bombs in there. Hey, we're not here to F around to that other network. Now, there is some reporting today about what the show might look like on that other network. This is from Front Office Sports.
ESPN and ABC is what we're talking about. Yeah, go ahead.
Correct. The show will be going over to ESPN, and there's been a lot of speculation on what that show might look like. Well, there is some reporting today that ESPN is intending that the post-game show, this is Michael McCarthy from Front Office Sports, who is reporting that the post-game show will be as long as the ones on TNT, that they are saying, hey, you got a full runway to just go with this. We're not trying to bump you to get to Sports Center or to get to whatever shows after. You guys can hang out as long as you want.
Well, and that's the interesting rub, because typically on ESPN for the biggest events, Monday Night Football, or if they have any kind of a postseason, et cetera, any big event, they go right to Sports Center and Scott Van Pelt, and he essentially does the post-game quick highlights and interviews a guest from on scene and that kind of thing. So now they're going to be doing this. I thought it was also interesting. Charles Barkley said they've done a pilot. They did a rehearsal show for ESPN, and he called it a bleeping train wreck.
Well, I thought what he was talking about was that they did a pilot show for a post-TNT show that would, if they lost the NBA and just had those guys around, having them do a show where they didn't have the NBA. And he said it was a mess, because he's like, we don't have highlights, we don't have anything, and it would just be these guys talking about anything else. So yeah, I mean, listen, a lot of people are saying what's going to happen on ESPN are they going to shoehorn Stephen A. Smith in there? Look, TNT is still producing the show. It's going to have the same look. It's the same studio. This news today that they're going to have as long as they want. The one big question, I think Bill Simmons talked about this, was the amount of commercial breaks. That one of the problems with ESPN's post-game show versus TNT, they got to go to commercial like every 4 minutes. You get to say three things, and then you got to go to commercial. The other guy, you don't get a chance to breathe and let the show just kind of
Right.
originate. So that's a big difference between the TNT
And
format.
especially at halftime. Like, this has been a common complaint for the last few years that Disney's trying to make so much ad money at the half that there's almost no studio show at all at the half, where they literally take a 3-minute break. They come back with music playing and show a highlight and have whoever the host is now, it's Mike Greenberg, go,
not Mike Greenberg. Malika Andrews.
Malika Andrews now, but I thought Mike Greenberg was also doing it at one point.
Mike Greenberg did it previously. Malika took over for him.
So she comes on and goes, Jason Tatum, a big 20-point first half. Can the Celtics keep it up in the second half? We'll come back with more in a minute. And then they show 3 more minutes of commercials.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, there is no
halftime show.
There is no organic discussion back and forth. It's, hey, you get a quick 30-second quip, you get a quick 30-second quip, you get a quick 30-second quip, and then we're going to go to break.
And we're going to run 3 more minutes of ads. Yeah. Okay, so here is also the update on the finale, which, again, had 8.1 million watching. The playoffs overall are up. And again, we should qualify all of this. You have out-of-home measurement. Again, up until 2020, you weren't measuring if people are watching in a sports bar or watching at somebody else's house with a portable people meter that they now have. Qualifier number 1. Qualifier number 2, the NBA ratings went off the cliff a couple of years ago. So what you're seeing now, best since 2019, is the best after the ratings went off the cliff. So that's another part. And one more thing that I'm going to keep track of here, keep the receipts on. And I'm not saying you're saying this, Mike, but I want your take. All this talk that the NBA is so much more popular than college basketball, time and again, the NCAA tournament and their ratings outrate the NBA playoffs, have bigger audience. The Elite Eight game on cable with Duke playing Alabama, a blowout game that was on TBS, that was on Turner on a Saturday night, just like this playoff game we're showing you on the screen if you're with us on the video audience, Pacers-Knicks on Turner on TNT. That NCAA tournament Elite Eight game, even though it was a blowout, had 9.8 million people watching. There are not more NBA fans than there are college basketball fans. And if you even want to go next level, the next weekend on Saturday night, I know it was network TV, Duke played Houston, and over 16 million on average were watching, and 20 million were watching at the end of the game for the Duke collapse and the Houston win. 20 million in the last half hour. These NBA Finals games as standalones won't get anywhere near 16 million on average or 20 million watching at the end. So this notion is a lie. It is a fallacy, a myth, that there are more NBA fans than there are college basketball fans. That tournament in March and the college hoops has more audience, period. There you go. I'm off my soapbox. Any follow-up on that before we move off the hoops?
My follow-up would be, I don't debate that. I would just say, I guess the NBA, long season, night to night, bigger audience. College basketball does not rate well during their regular season from November to the tournament.
Fair.
The tournament rates well. It's an event-based rating more so than a Duke Wake Forest game in February is not doing very well. Yeah.
But most of the NBA games in the regular season struggle to get more than a couple of million people watching.
Yeah, no, I think the NBA regular season rates better than the college basketball regular season does.
But overall, there aren't more fans of the NBA if you get to their biggest games and they can't match the college audience.
I would ask this question. You know, obviously the NBA is in regional markets every single night.
That's
here,
correct.
like NBC Philadelphia, what the ratings for a Tuesday night in February is up against, Michigan State versus Illinois,
right.
Which doesn't have a regional.
We should point out, while we're on this subject, that when those Elite Eight games were being played in the NCAA tournament, there were NBA regional broadcasts on cable competing against them. Right now, these NBA playoff games have been standalone games for the last 2 or 3 weeks. There's no other basketball on. And again, the finals will get underway on Thursday night. Shall we move on to hockey? And here we go again. Same song, second verse with Florida Panthers, Edmonton Oilers. That was the matchup a year ago, won by Florida. Same two teams now. Mike Gill, I ask to you, is this going to be a decent 3 million, 4 million people watching? Or has everybody checked out on the hockey? Because, again, it's not a major Northeast market, a brand name, and the fans that saw it last year. What's going to happen with Edmonton and Florida attention-wise as it begins on Wednesday night? What is your projection? What is your prediction?
I would say, listen, the fact that you got the repeat, the fact that they play each other again, Edmonton and Florida, that you got the rematch is the word I'm looking for. There you go, rematch. Does that add a little bit more intrigue? Okay, and it was last year, correct me if I'm wrong, Florida goes up 3-0, Edmonton comes back and makes it a 7-game series. You got a little intrigue there. I don't know if it's enough to get this thing, whopping ratings. Now, I will say TNT has it. The TNT coverage, I think, is better than the ESPN coverage. We were talking about that in the studio here. Their studio show and programming better than the ESPN show and programming. I don't know how much of a jump that gives everything, but I do not anticipate Edmonton, Florida, round 2 doing much in the ratings.
Okay, so a year ago, the combined audience on ESPN and on the CBC in Canada for the entire series was an average of 8.8 million. The Game 7 had 16 million combined. Again, a lot of that is the Canadian audience.
That is true.
They generally get 7, 8, 9 million people watching the Stanley Cup Final, especially if there's a Canadian team in it. So and again, we go through another year of it's been 32 years since a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup. If Edmonton hypothetically gets up in the series, does Canada, do they embrace this even more if it looks like Edmonton might win it this time?
Absolutely.
And help that overall number. What do you say?
I see. That's where I need a guy like John Lewis maybe to explain. The Canadian market, you might have 98% of the country watching this thing, but what does that do
if they get up in the series? Right, especially.
Well, I don't even know. Okay, so you might have 80% of the country watching it from the get-go. It might go up to 90 if they get But I don't know what that does for the overall rating. TNT doesn't prosper from that, do they?
Well, and again, it's more the NHL and selling ads. The Turner audience again is going to be about 3 or 4 million. It's not going to be as good as ESPN. They're not the default like what ESPN is that people will turn to and will watch. They'll have it in hotels. They'll have it on in sports bars. You got to turn it on and find it. That doesn't mean that Kenny Albert and Eddie Olczyk and Brian Boucher don't do a great job and their production isn't great.
I would say that TNT, I would say the hockey fan, and I have one sitting to my left here, they would choose TNT's coverage over ESPN's coverage. Is that accurate? I'm asking.
Yeah.
Correct? Thumbs up? Yes, he gives me a thumbs up. He's telling me
yes.
he's a hockey fan. He says,
Nick, right? That's Nick, your guy, right?
No, this is Alex, my intern over here.
Alex, your intern, says yes. Thumbs up on.
He is a hockey guy, and he prefers the Turner coverage over the ESPN coverage.
But just because there's not a New York, there's not a Boston, there's not a Detroit, you wonder if, because you saw it last year, if that's not going to hurt this. We'll see. Now, obviously, if they push to a 6th game,
well, I would ask you,
winner take all 7th game, it'll be different.
You are in a hockey market. I mean, a place that was a hotbed for a good stretch there.
Yes.
Philadelphia hasn't been in the playoffs for 5 years, so this is like foreign territory right now. Tampa, where you are located,
is not as hard as your Flyers are making it look. The Lightning were in the Stanley Cup Final 3 years in a row. The Panthers have now been there 3 years in a row. The least the Flyers can do is make the playoffs, Mike Gill. I see that Flyer jersey over your left shoulder in the video shot. The least they can do is make the playoffs.
Yeah, so I would ask you, being in a pseudo hockey market, a newer hockey market the last couple of years, is Tampa juiced up about their partners?
I think there's some anti. I think that there's no love lost, and the Panthers have knocked the Lightning out the last 2 years, and Tampa is a top 10 market. I think there are fans watching this market as the anti, wanting to see them lose. But stay tuned. How much anti, again, is in Chicago? How much anti is in Montreal for the Edmonton Oilers or for the Florida Panthers? Does anybody in New York or Boston care? That's what we're about to find out.
I would imagine if you asked a non-hockey fan but a sports fan who's casually involved if their team's involved, who the best team in the East is, I don't know that they would say Florida. I don't even know that they would know that.
Well, like, for example, though, Washington was right up near the top in the Eastern, Washington, D.C., we're talking about Washington Capitals, in the Eastern playoff seedings. They had Ovechkin break Wayne Gretzky's all-time record. If they were making a run with him having broken the record and the possibility he might retire if they win the whole thing again, now you got a different storyline. That registers more in the Northeast. It didn't happen. Washington got beat in the playoffs, and you have what you have.
And to go off on that, I think if you just grabbed a random sports fan who doesn't follow hockey, they follow their team. Hey, who are the best teams in hockey? Pittsburgh?
Didn't make the playoffs, by the way.
Exactly, but I think like the Florida, and even though they were in the Stanley Cup a year ago and they're back again and they're playing this, I don't know that most people are. So it will take a lot here for this number, but you do have a big star in Edmonton, two of them, so you get
Connor McDavid.
Connor McDavid, obviously.
Moves the needle.
Two big stars there.
Again, that gets underway Wednesday night, and the NBA Finals on Thursday night, so stay tuned here in the dog days.
Yeah, so you get a little every other night. You get a little every hockey, basketball.
That's by design, and the hockey's been over with since late last week. They've now waited 4 or 5 days. The Knicks-Pacers got done on Saturday night. They're going to wait 5 days before it gets underway. Sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind when that happens too. All right, let's move to one more thing before we're done on the Last Word on Sports Media show and podcast. Thank you for seeing us here live on the program. What's going on with the possibility that the NCAA basketball tournament may expand? I know the talk, Charlie Barker, the president of the NCAA, said that the tournament might expand as soon as this season. They are talking about it. They're talking with the television partners. I don't see the need for it to go beyond 68 teams for the men's tournament. What's your quick take on that? Do they need to have more of this? It is apparently being discussed.
It's preposterous. There's no need for this. Nobody cares. Nobody wants it to be bigger. The only people that want it to be bigger are the people that want a bigger wad of cash in their pocket. That is the only reason that anyone would justify making what has been a perfect tournament ruined. I mean, who needs to see more teams in this thing? There's already a bunch of 17 and 14 teams in this thing. Why would we want to reward mediocrity? That's all we're doing. Hey, let's let more mediocre teams. Let's let 16 and 15 complain that they weren't team 97. I mean, what are we doing here?
I agree.
If anything, the 68 teams, those first four, nobody needed them either. Nobody cares about those first 4 games.
And one thing that I will add, again, I don't do a lot of reporting, but I have talked to a source I'll even put it within CBS Paramount, who said at the highest level for CBS Paramount and for Warner Brothers Discovery, which is Turner, they have the contract, and they have the contract for another decade, Mike. They are lukewarm on more of these play-in first 4 tournament games. And that's the killer. That's the killer right there for any expansion. If your television partners aren't willing to go along with it, and from my understanding, part of the argument is you already have games on the Tuesday and the Wednesday, and not a lot of people are watching those games. This really gets cranked up on the Thursday, Friday. Why do you want to cram 2 more, 4 more, 8 more games after Selection Sunday before you begin the big tournament with 16 on Thursday, 16 on Friday that we all love? Those should be national holidays. So I believe that's the ultimate checkmate. If the TV partners don't want this, don't want to pay for it and televise it, it's over. It's dead no matter what the NCAA wants, and the schools and the coach. The coaches and the ex-coaches all want this because they want bonus money and notoriety from being in the NCAA tournament. So, of course, they want more games.
Well, one thing I would say is, look, the only way, and I threw this out way back during the tournament when this comes up, should they expand it? The only way I could see this possibly, and I threw out an idea, is if you had a complete mid-major tournament on their side.
You did. You talked about that.
Right. And then the power conferences have a tournament on their side until they both get down to their Sweet 16. And then you take the teams, or the 32 teams that are left, and then you have the best of the mid-majors against the best of the Power 5 and reseed them into a tournament. This way, you're not getting a 16 playing a 1 where it's an ACC versus a MEAC. That's the game no one needs to see. So if you had a mid-major tournament, and this is where, okay, ESPN gets the contract for the mid-major tournament, Turner has CBS the contract to the Power 5 tournament, and then ESPN can say, okay, now we have programming on Tuesday when, that would be the only way that a television network, I think,
and by the way, you explained it before, and I interjected that this is not as ridiculous an idea on the face when you say it, because you take away the argument of we don't have the same shot that the big boys have. If you were to have, under your theory, did you have 64 teams of the mid-majors or 32? Yeah, I think you had 32 of each. You had 32 of each, right? Mid-majors.
Yeah, I think we took 32 and 32. There's your 64. So you're getting 32 Power 5s.
That's right. And then 32 mid-majors. Nobody would have an argument that, we were deserving and we didn't get in. If you can't be one of the 30, 31, 32 best out of the Power 5 or out of the mid-majors, there's your argument.
And then every one of the mid-majors is playing for a chance, if they win one more game, that they're in the Sweet 16 against a Power 5 team.
Right.
So all they have to do is win you win your 2 games against mid-majors, and now you're into the big tournament against the Power 5. So it's a way to expand it,
But we both know the truth. If you expand by 8 teams, hypothetically, and go to 76, 7 out of those 8 teams every year, and maybe 8 out of those 8 are going to be Power 5 schools. The little guy's not going to get chances, because you're going to hear all the Power 5 that are all greedy. They want the spots. They're all going to say, well, no, it should be the best teams. And if we're the best teams, we should get all the spots. So this isn't to help the little guy. This isn't to help the magic of the tournament, which is the little guy pulling upsets. So you and I are in agreement, don't expand the NCAA tournament, but the TV networks hold the real key. If they're not figuratively, then there you go.
And I love the NCAA tournament. I schedule vacation around the NCAA tournament every year, and I don't need to see more games.
And by the way, the magic of it is the format they currently have. It's perfect. You don't have to break something that's perfect to try to make it like more perfect. There's no such thing as more perfect.
By the way, to update my idea, no, I actually had 2 64-team brackets. So it was 64
of the mid-majors may be too many, and honestly, 64 of the big boys may be too many.
I agree, but the point is the mid-majors are saying we don't have enough in this tournament because there's so many mid-majors getting automatic berths.
On your idea, they would do somersaults. They would come to Atlantic City and not only high-five you, they might kiss you on the mouth. If they could have their own tournament with 32 teams of just them playing each other with a guarantee that 16 of them get in the big tournament, they would sign up for that right now. They would sign over their firstborn.
Yes.
Right now.
And they should. And this is where, I think like in ESPN, who airs all of those mid-major conference tournaments, you get rid of all those conference tournaments and you start the 64 thing during when the conference tournaments would have started. So this way you have programming all day. You're not losing your programming of those conference tournaments. You're just replacing it with an entry into the NCAA tournament.
Well, and let's give you a perfect segue and we'll get out of here on this point. The college baseball playoffs are going on right now. They have eliminated 48 teams this weekend and narrowed down to their final 16, and they're going to play the super regionals where 2 teams play each other in a best-of-3 situation at 8 different sites. 16 teams are left. But you look at the upsets that were going on by the little guys, where East Carolina knocked out Florida, beating them twice, even though East Carolina didn't win the regional, and you're showing the Florida coach Kevin O'Sullivan. In my part of the world, he's gotten in a lot of hot water and had to apologize yesterday for his behavior this weekend at the regional site where they lost twice to East Carolina as he had a profanity-laced tirade against an NCAA representative and a Coastal Carolina representative because they moved the game time back for an hour, and he went berserk on their players. But my point is, East Carolina, non-Power 5, beat Florida, knocked them out. Southern Miss.
I will
not
say
Power 5,
East Carolina's not a Power 5, but pretty darn good baseball school.
They're good baseball programs.
There was a guy by the name of Mike Trout, you may have heard of him, who committed to go to East Carolina. So they are a pretty good baseball school.
Like Southern Miss knocked Alabama out of the NCAA tournament, getting the chance to do so. Wright State, let's hear it for the Wright State Raiders in Dayton, Ohio. They knocked out the number 1 seed in the whole tournament, Vanderbilt, this past weekend. UT San Antonio, UTSA knocked out Texas, one of the top seeds in the tournament. What you're demonstrating is if the little guy gets a chance, they get a chance at pulling the upsets, it makes the magic. Now, the problem is, like the SEC hates this. They don't want Vanderbilt losing to Wright State, Florida losing to East Carolina, Alabama losing to Southern Miss. They don't want this, and I probably left a couple other upsets out too. The power conferences don't want this. They want more greed, more money, and keep the little guy away from us because look at what happened in the baseball this week.
Yeah, well, guess what? Do a better job. I mean, that is the weakest thing ever. It's like, hey, do a better job recruiting. Do a better job of getting better players. Instead of saying we want guarantees because we're not good enough. I mean, how kind of weak sauce is that?
Murray State knocks out Ole Miss in Oxford on Monday night to knock them out of the NCAA baseball tournament, Murray, Kentucky. And they
By the way, there's one that you missed. There's one that you missed, and I watched it. West Virginia beat Kentucky to go to the Super Regionals. You didn't even say it right.
West, by God, Virginia is alive and well in the Super Regionals this weekend. What are they playing at LSU this weekend?
LSU.
For a spot in the College World Series.
Yes, and by the way, they beat Clemson before that in a wild game. They beat Clemson.
Mountaineers.
In the Kentucky game, they're down 12-7 in the 8th. They come back and put up a 5 spot and end up winning that game 13-12. And it's look.
But like
I don't think.
Oregon State's hosting one of the Super Regionals with Florida State. I mean, you've got everybody paying attention to this right now because of the upsets.
I'm not sure, though, on the college baseball level, if I think people are just putting it on. It's like I said, it's an event thing. It's on. It's that time of the year.
It's a bigger deal when it gets to the College World Series. There's no doubt. But at least there's been some upsets, some of the little guys.
I've been watching a lot. Now, this is one complaint I have, okay? I'm a West Virginia grad. I watched Saturday night against Clemson. I watched Sunday against Kentucky. It's on ESPN Plus. I'm watching ECU. My girlfriend's an ECU alum, so we're trying to flip back and forth. In the flipping back and forth, you can't do it on these streaming services.
ESPN Plus, right.
Now, the West Virginia-Clemson game was on the ACC network, so I was able to watch that on the television and then go to another platform.
Get her set up on the phone or on the computer so she can just watch those ECU Pirates while they get rowdy. They got The football stadium is known as Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium. I speak the language. They get rowdy at the Dowdy. They're getting rowdy over the Pirates right now.
And they should. It's a good team. That, by the way, they got knocked out by Coastal Carolina, which there's a kid from our area. He pitched against my team. He is the number 1, I think, for Coastal Carolina.
You never know. Texas, San Antonio beating Big Bad Texas. This was fun for this weekend. So the college baseball continues. The softball World Series continues, where Oklahoma's got what? Have they won 4 in a row, 8 in a row, 27 in a row?
4 in a row.
Softball titles. Who's going to knock them off in the Women's Softball World Series in Oklahoma City?
I was in your neck of the woods in February, and I called a bunch of games during the opening weekend of the Women's Softball Series for MLB Network, and I saw a bunch of these teams. Texas Tech, the girl from Texas Tech, she was with Oklahoma, transferred. So there's a lot of teams that think they can knock off Oklahoma this year. It's a wide open field.
All right, stay tuned. The Women's College World Series going on. The baseball college super regionals leading to their World Series going on. NBA Finals, Stanley Cup Finals. Did we leave anything else out on the sports media landscape? For a June that's a little slower, I think we're good. Are we not? Did we leave anything out? Are we good?
I think there's always a lot that we can do. By the way, locally here, Tom McCarthy, the Phillies play-by-player, won't be calling the game tonight. He's calling the game nationally for TBS. It's the first time I've seen that happen. Scott Fransky's going from radio to television. So T-Mac, Tom McCarthy, a name that people should know from CBS, NFL, the NCAA tournament. You're going to hear him do national tonight, TBS, Major League Baseball. There's a little nugget for you.
What is that game tonight if we know? The TBS Tuesday night game of the week. So he's the national.
Two of them. I don't know which one he's on.
All right, so he's on tonight. By the way, blast from the past, it's in your market. My boy Scott Fransky and I, we go back to the late 1990s when we worked together at Prime Sports Radio, based out of Irving, Texas. Fransky and I are national radio brothers from another mother. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I got to shout him out if he's doing TV work tonight for the Phillies, because he's done a great job on the radio for a lot of years.
He is doing the TV. He did some last week because when Philadelphia was in Sacramento, McCarthy's daughter had graduated from college, so he missed a game for that. So Fransky did TV last week, and now he's doing it again tonight because T-Mac is going to be on
TJ
TBS.
Was the afternoon host as I go third person on Prime Sports Radio out of Dallas, out of Irving, Texas, and Scott Fransky was my update guy for a lot of those times and a fill-in host, and that's longer ago than he and I want to admit.
By the way, so we got somebody watching. Eric K. Confirmed Oklahoma was eliminated. Yeah,
they're out.
Texas Tech. The reason I mentioned that is because everybody thought it was a wide open field, and now they're out. And Texas Tech, Najee Canada, who was the pitcher, she transferred from Stanford. I called the game. She hit a grand slam or a 3-run homer. I can't remember in the game to win it down there. But she's the pitcher for Texas Tech. She transferred from that team. But they're the ones that eliminated Oklahoma. I might have said that wrong.
Oklahoma will not win the Women's College World Series in Softball World Series for the 23rd consecutive time.
So what I was saying, I might not have came out right, was everybody when I was in Tampa or Clearwater, it was in Clearwater. Right? Everyone was talking about how wide open it was this year because everybody thought Oklahoma was beatable. And one of the teams that people were talking about was Texas Tech. I called that game Texas Tech. Yep.
Wreck 'em.
So, Eric K., good work out of you finding that.
I'm double-checking on the Women's College World Series. And is that's a best-of-3 series now with Texas? That's how it's going to finish up? Yes, so Texas into the Women's College World Series Finals, and I'm looking for when that actually begins in Oklahoma City. It either begins tonight or tomorrow night, so stay tuned. But other than that, I think we've covered pretty much everything else. Everything else good on the sports media front, Mike Gill?
We probably missed something, but we hit on a lot. I don't know.
We did. And again, thank you for finding us on social media. Mike's afternoon show is the Sports Bash in Atlantic City on 97.3 ESPN, 2 to 6 Eastern time. Thank you for finding us here. Like us, share it out on social media, subscribe, also rate us and review us on the pod form, Apple, Spreaker, Spotify on the podcast. For Mike Gill, I'm TJ Reeves. Thank you for being with us on the Last Word on Sports Media Pod.